the woman tradition calls a sinner, but who becomes the most devoted follower of Jesus.
I see Mary Magdalene as one of the most compelling figures in the entire gospel.
A witness to the crucifixion and the resurrection. She is one of the most misunderstood women in the Bible.
She was the first Christian.
Known as a penitent prostitute, was she, in fact, the wife of Jesus?
There's an air of scandal about this.
The Bible tells us little about Mary. Is it possible that everything we've assumed about her is wrong? And could lost Gospels help fill in the missing parts of her story and tell us who really was Mary Magdalene? For many Christians today, Mary Magdalene is revered for her compassionate love for Jesus.
I think Jesus meant everything to Mary.
She was present at the crucifixion, and most importantly, she was present at the resurrection. She's the first person to whom Jesus appears after his resurrection.
Do not weep, nor grieve, nor be irresolute, for his grace will protect you.
Yet when it comes to the details of Mary's life, the Bible says very little. The New Testament mentions her just 12 times.
Mary Magdalene is remarkable. There are so few mentions of her in the Gospels, but they're so central to the story of Jesus, and they've filled our imagination for centuries.
In reality, many of our ideas about Mary are no more than myth. Perhaps the most enduring one is that she is a fallen woman, a prostitute saved by Jesus from a life of sin.
She's very often seen as an extremely seductive, erotically charged woman.
2,000 years on, it has become hard to separate legend from fact in the story of her life. Who was Mary, really? Where did these myths come from? And what is the truth about her relationship with Jesus? The myth that Mary was actually a prostitute stems from one key event described in the Gospel of Luke.
Let's set the scene. Jesus has been invited to lunch at the house of Simon the Pharisee.
And a woman in the city, who was a sinner, having learned that he was eating in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster jar of ointment. The Bible describes how a sinner, someone believed to be a prostitute, comes to visit Jesus.
The fact that Jesus allows this woman to just walk in and anoint his feet and touch him is the big deal. He can't possibly be a prophet or a messianic figure. He'd never allow a person like this to touch him.
To those present, it's a shocking provocation. But what's perhaps even more surprising is how Jesus responds.
The disciples are outraged. When Jesus rebukes them, he says that no, forgiveness is accessible to her too. She brings ointment that she uses on his feet, and she cries and then wipes his feet and dries them with her own hair, sort of a symbol of penitence and forgiveness.
The Bible never names this fallen woman, but a myth begins to grow that the sinner in this important story is Mary herself.
The idea of Mary Magdalene, the prostitute who repented, gives us a character who shows by her penitence that everybody can make it into the kingdom of heaven.
All four of the canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and John, tell a story in which a woman comes to Jesus and anoints his feet with expensive perfume. Not one Gospel of the four canonical Gospels identifies that woman as Mary Magdalene.
How then did Mary's name come to be wrongly associated with this famous episode from the New Testament? The answer, it seems, can be found 5 centuries later with this man, Pope Gregory the Great.
The reason why people think that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute is because in the 6th century, Gregory the Great gave a homily in which he equated Mary Magdalene with the sinful woman who anointed Jesus' feet. And since that day, Christians thereafter have thought that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute.
I think Pope St. Gregory the Great was not trying to be mean to Mary Magdalene or women. I think it was probably the result of poor scholarship.
By the time we get to Gregory the Great, we not only have a collection of 4 Gospels that circulate together, we have a tradition that says it's okay to blend these stories together.
It is from this mistake that the image of Mary Magdalene as a sinful prostitute emerges. It is a myth that has concealed the reality behind why she became so devoted to Jesus and played a central part in his life and resurrection. Instead, the truth is far more disturbing. According to the New Testament, Mary is possessed by demons, and it is Jesus who saves her. According to the Bible, Jesus' ministry begins near the Sea of Galilee, where he gathers his first disciples.
Here, on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, is the area where the Gospels most often locate activities, miracles, teachings of Jesus.
One of the coastal villages is Magdala. Was it here that Jesus first met Mary?
Mary Magdalene means Mary of Magdala. She was from Magdala, which is just over the hill behind me.
A woman in distress, what the Gospel of Luke calls a case of demonic possession. The woman is Mary.
What we know about Mary is that she's possessed by 7 demons. This would have been a very personally traumatizing condition to have. And she hasn't been able to find any kind of respite from it until she meets Jesus.
According to the gospel traditions, the way that Jesus dealt with specifically severe cases of demon possession is that he would get them to name themselves, and then having named them, then demanding by name that they leave the person.
It's difficult to imagine how profound that moment must be for her to finally feel free and cured and whole.
Jesus cleaned up her life, and she became absolutely devoted to him.
Maybe that Mary had some kind of mental illness, perhaps it was depression, who knows, but whatever it was, her encounter with Jesus was a life-changing one.
Following Jesus' intervention, she is one of several women who join him as followers.
One of the things about Jesus is that he has a very inclusive group of disciples. It's a very open kind of movement, and included women who a lot of the time might have felt themselves somewhat marginalized. Being with Jesus gave them a sense of identity and self-worth in a way that they often didn't find in ordinary society.
Mary Magdalene seems atypical for a Jewish woman of her time. Most Jewish women in the Galilee would have been in some kind of a domestic setting, either as a daughter or a mother or a wife, but to be out in the wilderness with an itinerant preacher with a name that does not link her to any man is unusual.
But in the case of Mary, it seems her role goes well beyond that of a simple spiritual follower.
One of the things that Mary brought to the Jesus movement was she had money, she had resources. She was one of several women who actually helped support Jesus, who provided for him during his mission.
Fishing was big business in first century Magdala. So if Mary had money, it came from fishing.
Perhaps she owns a fishing business and is using the proceeds from her fishing business to fund the Jesus movement.
We know that Jesus was trying to reach out to women, so he's naturally going to have been looking for influential women in the community who had that credibility, woman to woman, as it were.
Luke describes these women who are supporting Jesus. We have Mary Magdalene, but we also have Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward, and Susanna, and many others. So there are a lot of women who are supporting Jesus, which means that they're also following him. And there's a name for people who follow Jesus, and that name is disciple. In any situation where someone's holding the purse strings, they have power. They're in control. So the fact that she's a backer of the Jesus movement, it doesn't mean that she gets to shape Jesus' teaching, but it gives her access to Jesus.
Mary follows Jesus during the many months that he preaches in Galilee. But what happened during that time? An astonishing discovery made in Egypt in 1945 points to one shocking answer.
This is ground zero for those conspiracy theories that there was some sort of a relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
Could it be that Mary and Jesus